All right, guys, I cannot be more excited. We have the very first flight controllers coming off the production line tomorrow, which means they're going to be in your hands pretty quick. And we're going to tell you about the first of many features to come. Our new AI filter, Nick has been locking himself in the basement working on. What's it called, Nick?
The official name for the first generation of the new AI-driven flight controllers is Cerebro.
So listen up, sit back, crack yourself a cold one. We're going to talk about Cerebro. We're going to talk about why it's better. And we're going to talk about this cool H7. And there's going to be many videos behind this one, but I think this is one you're not going to want to miss. All right, hey everybody. We're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna try and get better about doing videos in general, and we're gonna talk about one of the first things that you're gonna get when this new exciting H7 uh, flight controller comes out. One of the new features we're gonna have working, me and Nick are pretty excited about, and it's a new filter. So kind of the goal of our end goal for FlightOne and Falcon X and whatever is we really want you to just plug in the flight controller, flick a switch, move some controls, and get flying with this amazing flying quad. And right now, I think we're in our opinion we're pretty close to it. I mean, there's some little things we can do better, but one of the big things is you have to go in there and you choose your tune and you choose your filters, and we have a lot of presets in there, and the majority of people they work pretty good, but there is definitely room for improvement because every tune doesn't fit every quad. And I mean, honestly, if you build your quad really good with solid hardware, just about every tune works. I know my quads I can use just about every one, and they all have different feels and different everythings. But I know a lot of guys, you're racing, you beat up your quad, or you're not using, the motor bearings are more noisy, or I don't know, the frame has different resonance. So one of the big things is the filter. So we need to filter out more noise, and I think we're going to kind of talk about that here. Um, you know, uh, other softwares deal with that different ways, and other softwares are more filtered, which we don't want the over filter because we want it to fly well, we want it to look good, we want this you know have that amazing feel, but at the same time reject the noise that we don't want. So one of the very first things, long story short, that we're doing is an AI driven filter. The filter's going to come in stages. So the very first release you're going to get, it's going to be somewhat AI driven. It's probably going to be more processor driven, less AI driven. And then as time goes on, it's going to get more and more AI driven. We're going to train it from the factory to work well when it comes out. But as time goes on, we're going to even let you guys do some training for each individual quad, and so make it better and better. And basically, what that means by training is you're going to fly it around. So you're gonna pop your flight controller in, you're gonna set it up, you're just gonna fly your quad. It's gonna fly pretty well, but as time goes on, it's gonna fly even better and better and better till you get that buttery smooth, perfect quad. And at the same time, you don't have to do anything. I think a lot of the things people are worried about. I mean, one thing I always hear, if we say we're going to automate filters or automate PIDs, is they're like, "Oh, but I like the feel of it over filtered, or I like the feel of it under filtered," and uh, you know, that's fine. So we're going to basically have a slider. So if you want it to feel more over filtered, then we'll ignore more data, and you want to feel under filtered, we're still going to ignore the bad data, but we're going to make it more responsive. Because what people are talking about when they say that is they want to be really responsive or less responsive. And to us, it's kind of silly to do that with filters. And the same thing goes with PIDs as well. When that's really, I mean, it's kind of it's the RC inputs, it's the controller inputs. Really, is where you should be filtering that. You shouldn't be filtering the way the quad flies because the quad just stabilized perfectly. I mean, I got Nick here with me. He's being very quiet while I talk.
Yeah, patiently awaiting my arrival.
Yeah, he's like looking at his notes right now. But
I'm staring
um
right into the eye of the camera.
but so that's my vision. That's my goal. That's always been my vision. The new flight controllers give us more power to do a lot more of the things we've been thinking about doing. And as time goes on, we're gonna have even better flight controllers. But But one thing about this is this finally gives us more power than we need to do the basic flying. I mean, right now our F4 flight controllers they're good at doing their flying. But to do AI and expanded filters and stuff, I mean we're really at the edge of the processor on these flight controllers. So this will give us more things to work with. So Nick's been diving deep into the filter world. He has
Oh
been,
yes.
yeah, you've been spending every waking moment thinking about filters. Uh,
Exactly. It's
so
been it's been a grind, but it's been fun. I've learned a lot more than I ever thought I would about filtering.
yeah, and I think we've been talking about some of the things you learned, and we're gonna let other people know in on the secrets we know. So before we even talk about, I guess, where our filter's going and what our filter's doing, let's talk about what filtering we have out there. I mean, we can basically start with our current flight controllers. I mean, right now we have essentially, we're not going to try and get too technical, but we have a low pass filters is one type of filter, and what that basically does is noise is on a certain frequency and it cuts off noise above a certain frequency. I mean, in theory, you want to get all the movement, so whatever the most movement you can have at what frequency, the fastest quad can move, and we want to cut off everything above it. On paper, that sounds great and all, but what tends to happen is the more you filter, you eliminate some good information with bad information. Would you agree with that statement, Nick?
Yeah, you slowly the more you filter out the bad data, the more delayed the good data gets.
Yeah. Yeah, because well, yeah, I guess that's part of it too. You delay the data. So, when the wind hit your quad and made it jump a little, it takes, a little bit of time to get to the flight controller to tell you that so it can stabilize. So if you could have no filtering, which or very little filtering, you don't have that issue anymore and your quad flies better. Now the perfect goal would be have a gyro that just gets no noise. It has no bad data.
And then you'd
Um,
be a trillionaire overnight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But that doesn't exist, but really eliminating the data through hardware is a first step for a great quad. So even with our new filters, hardware filters and like a capacitor, for example, that
Yep.
filters the noise of the
LC
electrical system.
filters work wonders.
Yeah,
I
an LC filter.
highly suggest a capacitor on your VBAT line into your flight controller, no matter what flight controller you run. It makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. So, well, you said LC filters too, so let's not
Yes.
have them run out and get an LC filter because most LC filters will actually fry your electronics. So
That's a good point. Bad LC filters will
yeah,
fry your flight controller.
yeah. So, because what happens with an LC filter is it builds up this spike when you first plug it in because it's catching, it's charging capacitors or however it works. I think what happens is it filters current but lets voltage go through and it turns into this huge voltage spike and it actually fries some equipment. So you basically put some sort of diodes in there, flyback diodes, CVS diodes, whatever, to catch that voltage spike. And if you have a good LC filter designed well, you won't have the voltage spike, but you also get the filtering. So first of all, LC filter. Let's talk about that. So we actually embedded good filtering, the type of filtering, on our new flight controller. So we have we're putting a hardware filter on it, better than the old filters on the old flight controllers. If you look at our flight controller, when you get it, you'll see a nice big TVS diode to catch those big spikes. So that helps a little, right? That's the first step.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely. And that I would say that's probably the most important step. I mean, if you put just putting capacitor on the voltage input to your flight controller, you can actually almost feel a difference in how it flies. Like I have noticed very drastic changes in even how the quad responds just from adding some big caps onto the flight controller.
so that would be step one. So we've covered the new flight controller has some amazing LC type filtering on there. So the next thing is we recommend now the next source of your noise would be your ESC. Now, in our opinion, you should just buy our ESCs because we have special filtering with special little capacitors that actually go like we use electrolytic capacitors that solder directly to where all the noise is and condition of power. Our new designs are really cool for that. But however, you wanted to save a buck or two, or you could get ours in stock or whatever, and you got a different one. Use good capacitors. They're not going to work as well as a well designed ESC that's kind of designed around the capacitors like ours, but it's going to help a lot. So get a good capacitor. It needs to be.
And
Go ahead.
put it on the as close as possible to where the XT60 solders on.
So
Don't put it on the XT60.
yeah. So step one too. So there's a caveat to that as well. Let's go over a few things on the checklist. So the first thing is you need to use at least the gauge of wire as motor wire. Like I usually use the little scraps of motor wire that seems to work well.
Yeah.
But the tin wires they're made to go through holes and get solder wicked on them to make them bigger. The tin that's on there, the little tin wires, they're garbage. You need to chop off as much of those as possible, put wire around it, cover it with solder, make it a better conductor. Because
Yeah.
you're adding that has so much resistance, and we're trying to get as low resistance as possible. And then that goes. And the other thing, it needs to be a low resistance capacitor, so it's called low ESR. Just in general, if you buy an FM series Panasonic, it's going to work amazing. That's the best one you can buy. It's just easy to do that. We might include non-Panasonic FM because they're honestly really expensive. And not everyone wants to pay an extra few bucks to get it with their ESC, but we test tons and tons of capacitors, and we find the ones with the low ESRs that are the best price. So there are other ones out there. There might be slightly worse than the FM series. FM series actually are bigger too, so we also try and
Yeah.
look for
Yeah, they
size
are
versus
very big.
size versus how well the ESR is and everything. And we find the perfect capacitors, and we might change from time to time. But in general, if you just want to be confident it's going to be a good one, FM series, Panasonic. Majority of capacitors out there don't work well. So keep that in
Yes.
mind. And
Yes.
a lot of people's ESCs come with ones that don't work well either. So you might think you have this great thing on there. It's kind of like having a filter and the hole's too big. It just doesn't do anything. Um, so
Exactly.
so yeah, that's a good hardware filtering. Hardware filtering. Let's just eliminate because that helps our filter out. If we can have our filter do less, you're gonna have less latent data, right? And it's gonna know what happens to your quad sooner, so it's gonna fly better. That's the bottom line. So that covers the two sources of hardware filtering. I guess another source of hardware filtering would be our gummies in our flight controller, right? Because that
Yes. Oh, the
isolates.
gummies are gummies are very big.
Yeah.
Very
So
big
that
source of
because
noise
that
rejection.
isolates our flight controller from vibration. It gets even more vibration. It's kind of like the motor mounts in your car's engine, to keep some of the
Mhm.
vibration from going into your car's chassis and causing problems. Uh, Keeping things away from your flight controller. Your flight controller is a dainty little princess who wants to can feel the pee between the bed sheets or whatever underneath the mattress. So not putting stuff on top of the flight controller underneath. I know people tend to love to do that, but please just tape it to the frame.
Yeah, don't mount
Tape it.
things to the front. First, don't mount them
Yeah,
to the fucking controller.
it's
That's
it's
always a
not.
horrible idea.
I know it looks like a shelf. It is not a shelf. It is not what you think it's not. So that's another good one. But in general, let's just do all these things. Now we're trying to make it so idiot proof that you can do everything wrong and it still flies well. And I mean, right now you can probably filter the shit out of it. It'll fly 60% as good as it possibly can. So with the new AI filters, you can do a lot of stuff wrong, and hopefully we get to 95%, right? That's
Exactly.
really the goal.
That's the goal.
But if you want 100%, let's just do everything you can right. Because what's the coolest thing in the world is when I build a quad, I follow all these stupid little rules, and every single tune in our thing works on my quads, pretty much. Um, there's not any tune I can't choose that works. So I know a lot of people think the tune is really specific to the quad, but honestly, to me, it feels like with the tune, you're trying to fight the noise you're letting through. Like you're trying to not have it react to the noise. Like determ noise is a big one, right, Nick? Like
Oh yes, that is
determ
that is
loves to
one of the
react to noise. Yeah,
that is one of the biggest findings that I have figured out in the past couple of weeks is determ noise is really the killer.
yeah. So anyway, so that's our little primer. So hey, this is the first part of our long ass video. Um, let's filter us through hardware as much as possible. So now let's dive deep. So I know we've been looking deep into how other filters work, and in general, the way filters work is they're based on frequencies. There's lots of different filters. I mean, there's the Kalman filter. There's all these filters which essentially just meshes a bunch of sensors together to try and uh, counteract noise, and there's low passes and there's notches and there's all these different things. And so right now, every the RPM filters in beta flight are all the rage. They're I think they're hit or miss. I mean, you tell me, Nick. I think you've been doing research on this, but I think you'll see like half the people love them and half the people hate them.
Yeah, that seems to be the from what I've seen, I mean, on the Facebook groups and people, word of mouth, stuff like that, it does seem to be about 50% absolutely works incredibly perfect, 50% they just never get it working at all.
So yeah, so I think one big thing is setup. It takes time to set them up and make them work well. You have to have an ESC that supports it. You have to have the ESC set up. It has to have firmware set up. I don't
Oh,
know what's
especially
involved.
with BL Heli S seems to be one of the big caveats because normal BL Heli S doesn't support it, but there's like JESC and there's Maverick firmware as well, and also I've seen is only certain older versions seem to support RPM filtering and stuff like that. So you have to either buy, I think JESC you have to buy Maverick. I don't know. There's a bunch of weird caveats, especially when you use BL Heli S, which is what most micros use, and micros are really what RPM filtering would be best for. So it's kind of a weird thing that they have to go through, where they
And
can't
also,
really use it.
yeah, and a downside too is, I mean, yeah, you're catching, your props rotate at a certain speed, they turn into noise at a certain frequency. Yeah, that all makes sense, yada yada. But that only catches the prop being in great condition, spinning at that speed. Essentially, if you bend the shit out of the prop or hit a tree or you have frame resonance or all kinds of other things, that's not going to filter that out, right? You're gonna have all that bad noise in there. The RPM filter's not going to help you filter that out, which
Yeah,
doesn't
the resonance is
make a
the
lot of sense to me. Say that again.
yeah. I'd
Eh,
say
Resonance is probably the biggest thing because it just assumes that all your noise comes from the rotation of the prop, which is true most of the time. But for the times that it's not true, then it doesn't work.
I mean, because the way it works is it does. Correct me if I'm wrong. It does a mathematical formula based on your RPM, and it calculates this is what the noise should be at this specific frequency, and it
yeah,
filters that
essentially.
frequency out. Yeah.
Yep, it just
So
basically filters at the frequency that the motors are spinning.
I'm guessing if your frame starts to break down or whatever, it's going to slightly change that, right?
Yeah, you could get
Big spikes of resonance, especially if your frame is starting to degrade a bit, which is usually where most big resonance things come, or especially people using unibody frames and stuff like that. You could have resonance issues appear at frequencies other than what the motor's at if the motor gets close to within that range. So that's when the RPM filtering starts to break down and stuff like that.
Downsides is you have to run at a much slower speed. Everything, the
yeah,
gyro has a slower speed. The ESC is
incredibly
at a slower
CPU
speed.
intensive.
It's super CPU intensive. All this guy's latency. Latencies are enemy. And it's just there's a lot of negatives to this. And to me, it's kind of silly. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the math they do, and everything too, because you're setting the RPMs, right? So you should technically know what the RPM is before it has time to figure out the RPM, send it back to your processor slowly, right? Because it's latent, so it sets the RPM, then it has to tell the flight controller it set that RPM. I think it takes a little bit of time to ramp up, so maybe it sinks a little, but in reality, this is one of the reasons AI is great because AI especially could predict it, right? Like it could log, the RPM when you set it, the throttle, and what it ends up as at what time period, and it can actually predict where the filtering needs to be.
And the
Um,
biggest thing is
That it can also predict, especially when you traverse through those resonant frequencies, it will learn what those are and can predict them before you get to them. So there's no time difference between when you get to that frequency, you start getting resonance, stuff, starts going crazy, and then it tries to, then counteract it.
it doesn't take into account. So I'll use this as an example. So I did physics, light, and sound in college. So this is the kind of stuff that we did classes on. But for example, like if you're sitting at a beach, let's just we're sitting at a beach, we're enjoying the view. A wave is moving, and then another wave comes moving faster and hits that wave. It causes interference. And what happens is it changes the amplitude and the frequency of the wave. It might slow it down or speed it up and make it bigger or smaller. So what happens is two waves at two different frequencies colliding in two different amplitudes will create a second frequency slash amplitude of wave. And the same thing will happen with a quad, right? So if I have one motor spinning at, whatever, I don't know what the RPMs are, but let's say 8,000 RPMs, another spinning at 3,000 RPMs, and each arm has a different resonance frequency, and each arm, it's going to create noise at different frequencies. So if you're just trying to calculate based on frequency, you're not going to necessarily pick up on exactly where the noise is. Um, at least that's how I understand it, how I've seen it, how our logging has seen it. I mean, would you agree with that kind of stuff? Like RPM can only, if we had one motor on one quad, one carrier, it interference wouldn't be an issue between the
Yeah,
frequencies.
I mean, there's ways to kind of sort of get around that, but again, it's like for example, how they filter all the different harmonics. But again, then the problem turns into now you have a plethora of filters, and yes, the notch filters, if an analog notch filter does a good job at getting rid of certain frequencies, but the digital notch filters actually do have um, a little bit more distortion of the data, and so when you stack a bunch of them together, you can end up with negative effects such as data distortion and stuff like that, which is what you need to then counteract a lot of these like different frequencies happening in modes at different RPMs.
So this is one of the reasons why RPM filters have never been our cup of tea. They didn't make a lot of sense to us. I mean, they make sense, but it just didn't seem like something it's worth putting effort into, because we're all about flying, like responding to the data as quick as possible and getting the data as quick as possible. And this kind of goes the other direction. And what's funny is we were discussing this, and we were even discussing this today, and I'm like, the dynamic notch makes more sense to me, right? Because it's running a frequent FFT, filter frequency for fast
Fast
Fourier
forward.
transform, yeah, analysis of the noise of the data essentially, and turning that into frequencies of noise. I mean, in theory, that should be better than the RPM filters, except maybe if you're talking about latency. But then again, if you're predicting it, that then you're doing a God, I can't think of the term for the AI stuff that we're doing. What is it? What is it called? I can never. Neural networking.
Neural.
Yeah, yeah. That's the real way to do it. When you can actually, once things have been logged, and you can find basically the neural net can essentially find a pattern for basically where your noise is at certain times, what variables play into getting the noise. You can essentially build a neural net to figure out, when this happens, this is what you're gonna see.
Like an old school way of doing that, right? It's trying to take in data from a lot of different things, and trying to
Yeah,
figure out what that turns into. So
yeah,
that the Cowan's kind of like the old school way to do that, really,
yeah.
in my mind. I think AI based filtering would be the new school way, like combination of sensor fusion, which is what the Kalman needs to work with, right? With neural networking, and that's where we can get to the end. So this is what we've been essentially playing with up to now. This is what we've been working on. Is we want to basically predict and log and train to know when the quad's doing whatever, where the noise is going to be, and target that noise specifically. So going back to this RPM stuff, the RPM filter. Okay, we're going to take that off the table because we think that's only tied to RPM. Quick summary: only tied to RPM of the prop, doesn't factor in noise from anything else, right? It doesn't factor in the interference stuff and the other things. It doesn't do all the calculations it could possibly do to counteract that stuff. So we
And
don't
again,
think
it's also just stupidly CPU intensive. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it takes up so much CPU power when there's other ways, especially now that we have a processor that has very good neural net support and AI support. We could do that in a much more efficient manner, which is end goal. We'd rather make it more efficient than and take some time on getting it right rather than just throwing processing power at it.
So yeah, so my question is, so you know, what's weird is the dynamic notch they had before, we never implemented either. Um, and there's reasons for the reason we didn't implement that as well. Like in theory, a dynamic notch is not too bad either. It's analyzing the noise, it's filtering it out. But you discovered some interesting things about that. The reason in Data Flight why we believe we've seen that little bobbles all the time in their video, and it doesn't track as hard and stuff like that. I guess kind of why don't you give them a little synopsis of that stuff, like why did the dynamic filter not do better that they
Yeah,
used in the other age?
the concept is really good, in theory, but the problem that they've ran into is a lot of it comes down to the fact that, for example, Betaflight tries to make everything work on every target everywhere. And running the dynamic notch is very intensive. It takes up a lot of RAM space, so it doesn't fit to every target unless you use very, very, very tiny FFT buffers. Basically, the way it works is, the more data you can, they can't analyze a lot of data because that would take up too much space, and then that means that the notch doesn't have a very high resolution. It also means that they run it relatively slowly, so that it actually doesn't analyze quick enough to keep up with most of the changes in noise. And there's other problems like the resolution isn't that great. When you
So
do when
yeah,
you run it slowly and you have a very small amount of data, it's not very precise when you
to,
actually
to
get.
dumb that out a little is the amount of data they log over time is a lot less data than the more data you have, the more precise you can calculate. So
Yeah,
they're not logging near as much data because they're limited on memory, and they're limited on because they're trying to make it work for everything essentially.
yeah,
So
exactly.
and then the other problem is that you were saying, like, it's at 50 hertz steps, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
think 42 hertz or something like that steps. So it's not incredibly precise.
so
There's a
like the
very wide.
difference in movement of the cloud. I mean, we might see valid data at 120 hertz, but we want to filter out data at 128 hertz, for example. If it's
Well, the
within
biggest thing
50,
is that the problem is that you get, for example, let's say you do have a noise spike at like 120, let's say you have a noise spike at 185 hertz. Um, the width of that is only probably 5 to 10 hertz range of the noise. So if you put a notch on that, let's say your FFT isn't that precise and it says, "Oh, I think it's between 160 to 200 hertz." Well, if it's like 185 and you put a notch at 160 or 200, it's not really going to filter it out, but you're going to get the downsides of having the notch there with the data distortion without actually filtering out the data you don't want.
so you're gonna distort your data, right? You're gonna delay your data, and you're not even filtering the bad stuff. So you're
Yes,
having all the negatives, none of the positives. Um,
exactly.
yeah, so it's not a good way to go. So we're doing this new AI stuff, and this is gonna be step one. Like, listen, it's going to get even better. It's amazing now. Nick's been testing it for quite a bit, but it's going to get even better. And so what we're trying to do essentially is we're trying to predict the stuff, we're trying to log the stuff, we're trying to train everything, and we're trying to target the data. Our resolution for finding for the noise is much higher than anything that's ever been done before.
Yeah, it's about
Our
20 to 30 times higher
our
resolution.
our precision is much higher. Instead of that huge gap like we were talking about, we're targeting the frequency specifically. I mean, what else can you say about it? Like,
I would say it's the biggest thing is it's very, especially now that we're able to play with the AI stuff, it's incredibly precise and it runs very, very quickly. So it can essentially lock on to noise nearly instantaneously, or nearly, only within a couple gyro cycles of things happening.
so something along, I've used this number. I've said our CPU is like almost 20 times, as much as 20 times faster than our old MCU. And I know there's going to be guys out there. They're going to look at the megahertz and they're going to be like, "Oh, the old CPU is 168 megahertz, and your new one is 480." Which by the way, we're slightly overclocking the other. We can slightly overclock this one, so that's why we get the 500 megahertz number. But anyone that's in computers knows that it's not just about the megahertz, right? So that's just part of it, because you could get a much slower megahertz AMD chip and then a faster megahertz Intel chip, but the AMD is much faster, because it's megahertz is just one thing. It's like one instruction, how fast you can execute that one type of instruction, not everything. All right, so one other thing, I think we've talked about the AI filtering, what it's going to do. It's going to be released with the new flight controller that is ready. We're going to have a few other special things available too from right off the get go. And then, as time goes on, we're going to add more and more cool stuff that we can utilize this thing. But along the lines of why this thing is better. I mean, we're going to do more of these videos and we're going to go over more of the things. This is the first one. But one thing I've always quoted, our MCUs 20 times faster than old ones. And it's kind of funny. I was just talking to Nick. When I do these off the cuff, the numbers actually end up being right. But one thing this has that our old CPU doesn't is a CPU cache, and just enabling that alone, just putting stuff in the cache as opposed to just letting it run normally. Like we can put specific code bytes in the cache and special memories, and then there's special hardware things to get the data. There's all kinds of different things we can use on this new CPU to accelerate the CPU more than just CPU power, right? It's all these features add speed. But you tell me, Nick. So when you enabled just that stuff, how much faster was it? Like your AI stuff, the filtering.
So it actually was exactly 20 times faster, and that was just by enabling the cache alone. Without the cache, it was already twice as fast as the F4s, which winds up with about just the CPU speed alone. It was about 2.5, 3 times as fast from that. And then I enabled the cache, and it went 20 times faster.
Just those features alone, just the CPU and that cache on this just one function. This is just one chunk out of the filter, one routine we're using. We got 20 times the speed on just that one thing. So that is a significant upgrade in the CPU. I mean, the fact that our new flight controller not only does it, I'm doing the commercial now. Not only do we have this amazing replacement plan that you're getting for free when you pre-order from us, eventually it'll be like $10. You can get another one for $10 when you get it, which covers ship and handle and all that crap. Not only you got that, but not only do you got all the freaking UARTs out the butt, you can connect all your different devices. Not only you got the Vector OSD, which you can do these amazing graphics, which we're going to talk more about that. But it's minimum 20 times faster on some of the things we're doing.
It's crazy.
And it's
how
like
much
the
faster.
same price as flight controllers out there. Like, why would you want any other flight controller? In my opinion, there's nothing better than this. And we're going to write all the special code and all the special things that just take advantage of the power.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is I also want to point out something that kind of bothered me a little bit is that people are like, oh, this flight controller is not revolutionary. Guys saying SP Racing's had one out for like 6 months, a year now. And yeah, Dominic was the first to jump on board with the H7 processors. And
by the way, hold on, I'm gonna put a little asterisk on it. The processor he used is a much slower version of the processor.
Yes,
they're both H7s, but it was a slower H7. I just want to throw that out there. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
So first caveat is it is indeed a slower version of the H7, and second off, Betaflight does not they don't use any of the actual hardware acceleration built in. So it's like getting a Ferrari and then putting a cap at 100 miles an hour.
Which it still drives better. So don't get me wrong. I mean, his fly. We've been told. I haven't verified this, but we've been told it does fly better. So some people do own it, and they're like, "Man, it flies even better." So just imagine that.
100%.
The only thing you're doing is just speeding up some of the stuff Betaflight's doing. Very, very little, like double the speed. Really, essentially that's all it can take advantage of. The way it's set up, it doubles the speed.
Yep.
Which makes a big difference. But imagine 20 times. Let that sink in. I think we need a moment of silence just to sit. 20 times. Imagine if you had $10,000, and I'm going to turn that into $200,000. That's a lot more freaking money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a lot more power. Imagine your car can go 60 miles an hour. It's now going to go 1,200 miles an hour.
Yeah. It actually, like, I actually had to go through when I enabled the cache, because I was worried that the AI stuff that we wouldn't have enough processing power with my initial things, and it wasn't until I enabled the cache I actually had to go through and make sure that the CPU calculations are right and how long it was taking, because I didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way that just enabling the cache hardware acceleration made it 20 times faster.
Let's put it this way. As good of programmers as we are or aren't, no matter how much work we did, we are never going to get the old flight controllers. to be anything like these. So listen, yes, most of our new features are not going to work on the old stuff because we just got all this power and we're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I mean, the old flight controllers were like we were maxing them out. I mean, we're like overclocking them, and they're like running like 90% CPU usage when you use more than like one or two features on them. Like we ran out of power on the F4s. We can't
I,
do anything more on
I
them.
mean, let's put it this way: we managed to keep it at 32 kilohertz this entire time. Something Betaflight has like long forgotten. I don't even know. I guess they never hit 32 kilohertz. Let's start with that. And now they're like, oh yeah, 1 kilohertz is it's the way. Or fucking. I mean, they don't even run at 8 by stock now, do
I mean,
they? They
I also want to point out like the insane amount of time that Little Preston has put in to optimize it. I mean, that whole code base has been gone through and re-optimized by Little Preston at least thrice now that I can remember. I mean, weeks of just going through and every single function being analyzed to speed it up, just percentages at a time, just to make sure that we have enough processing power left to actually run everything that we need at 32 kilohertz. I mean, it was numbingly annoying how hard it was to make
so
sure that we utilized every bit of CPU
so
usage.
listen. We wish we could put all these cool features on the old stuff. I mean, we need to make money to pay our bills, so we need to sell flight controllers anyways. But it's just not going to be possible. So it's gonna be cool. The code's going to keep working. What you have now is going to keep working. But as we add in these cool new features, and that just is just the first of many, many to come, it's going to need to have the new power of a new flight controller.
Yeah.
And
And to be fair, I tried. I tried on an F4. I gave it a shot, and I think the max CPU power could run out was like 4 kilohertz or something ridiculously low. Like just to even get it so it would even arm and take off, and it was still maxing out of that.
yeah, so listen, this is level 1 of something we're calling. What are we calling it, Nick?
The official name of this new AI drone filter process is Cerebro.
So Cerebo 1.0. Now, as we improve it, the number's going to go up. We're going to get to 10.0. It's going to blow your freaking mind. Right now,
Exactly.
it's going to slightly blow your mind. Eventually, it's gonna really blow your mind. And
Yeah.
then we're gonna have flying cars, flying houses.
Flying washing machines.
Yeah, you're not even gonna need to leave your room to do your laundry by the time we get to there. So, so we're pretty excited. An update. We're releasing this video. This is Sunday night. I'm assuming I'm gonna have it up on Monday. Maybe not. Um, but we have the first. So basically, we've set up the production lines. All the boards are loaded in, the components are loaded, and everything's set up. We ran a few, like a plate of them. They
Yeah.
have DHL'd to me the plate, the finish of those boards for me to test and approve. Say everything's okay. Supposed to have them tomorrow. We've tracked them. They're coming tomorrow. That'll take them out one day to test. We will literally just check it over, do QA testing, QC testing on everything, make sure all the functions work. We say they work. They push the button. They do whatever they got to do on their end, and they
The
spit
robots
out
go
all
to
the rest.
town.
Yeah, the little robots. So we're really, really close to having
Yeah.
the full production ones.
And once we say everything's good, continue with full production, it only takes like 2 days to
Yeah,
finish them.
at most.
Like it's it's super duper quick to finish them.
So what's going to happen is we're going to get those boards. They're going to take them off. It's going to take a day or two. They're going to send them to us. We're going to QC them all, flash them all, test them all, and we're going to get them out as fast as we can. It shouldn't take us long to QC and test and flash. It's pretty quick. These are coming from China, the first batch. We also have some come from the United States that are going to trail these. The very first ones off the line are going to come from China. We're going to get them out to everyone immediately because we don't want any delays. But we're going to start. Our goal is to have everything sold in the United States to be made in the United States.
Yeah.
In Europe, it'll be a mix. In China, it'll probably be all Chinese made. In other countries, it might depend. In Australia, maybe it's easier for us to ship from the United States to Australia. The QC is going to be the same on all of the boards are going to be pristine, amazing boards. We're gonna make sure this is the first time we are in complete control of everything. Everything. We from
Mhm.
purchasing the individual components to making the PCBs, to getting them, the components placed on the QC, to flashing, to everything. We are complete control of everything. Before we had great partners that helped us with this stuff. We had good QC, but it's very exciting that that we're in complete control.
Yeah.
And what's cool about this too is we can actually batch up stuff, right? So we have tons of PCBs because we're in control of purchasing. I know these PCBs, they take time. They take,
It take a ton of time.
they take
That's
like a
why
month
things take
to make
forever.
these stupid PCBs when it takes 2 days to put components on them. So PCBs are cheap. Why don't we have stacks? Like why am I not like making my desk level with PCBs? It, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to have so many PCBs, I'm not going to be able to fit myself in my room. So we're going to keep production up. I mean, we're still going to have to do batches. We're still going to have to, be doing 1,000 at a time. So we got to sell. We're not going to obviously do another 1,000 when we have 998 on the shelf. But we are not going to have the delays we had before. Some of the other things are we're going to prioritize the orders coming to normal people over wholesale orders. So if a wholesaler comes in and goes, I need 50 flight controllers and we have, 70 on the shelf, we're going to be like, too bad. You're going to wait till the next batch gets here because we need to keep these 70 for our users. Like the people
Also,
that
keep
direct
in
customers.
mind the wait times between batches will be down to probably 2 to 3 weeks now. So we're
Yeah.
not bulking up on PCBs. We're bulking up on components that actually do take, because sometimes the components take 1 to 2 weeks to come in stock. We're bulking up on those too. So it basically just takes, I'd say, a week for purchasing the local components, getting all the orders filled, and then the actual SMT. And then I'd say, I don't know,
And some components take longer. And here's the thing: we know these components, they take longer to get. So we are going to buy a shit ton of those, right?
Yep.
Like if the CPU might get backward or whatever, we're going to have a ton of those on stock. So we're trying to control the process and control this thing. And yeah, in the beginning, little rocky, but not near as rocky as what you experienced in the past. And the fact that we're going to prioritize always having our stuff in stock, we're going to have 2 stock levels. We have wholesale stock level and we have retail stock level. So it's silly to me where these guys like Pyro and Race Day Quads and Get FPV and all these other vendors will have stock and we won't because we've sold all our stock to them. We're making less money selling stuff to them, and then we're kind of screwing our customers directly, which it's not fair. So we're going to treat our store like a store. Like if I own Pyro and I wanted to freaking make sure I have lots of these flight controllers, I'm going to buy 300 of these flight controllers because they're going to be on the shelf because I know people want to buy them. We're not going to let them buy out their stuff. If they want to have a good stock, they need to buy a good stock. And so to make sure it's on flight controller and Pyro and Race Day Quads and FPV, and I'm sure they're going to be great about that. They've never been an issue of buying a decent amount up front. But some of the smaller vendors, maybe they want to go knock out the rest of our stock because they decided that morning they got up they wanted flight controllers, and we're going to prioritize our customers is the bottom line. We're going to have three types of stock. We're going to have wholesale stock, we're going to have retail stock, and then we're going to have replacement stock. So people who need the flight controller, you have a race tomorrow, you got to get that flight controller. You're going to be able to get it from us. Is the bottom line. Is there anything else you can think of, Nick, to wrap up our?
I don't know. We did a good job covering Cerebro. I'm so incredibly excited for this. I mean, I've probably spent, like 10 hours a day for like 3 weeks now, just flying and logging and testing and getting everything set up for this thing. And like, it was just such an amazing feeling yesterday to kind of just be like, 1.0 is done. And
So
it just works so incredibly well.
like every programmer on the face of this planet, we're doing everything at the last minute. For some reason, no matter what, no matter how much time you give yourself, we got 7 years to get the first product out the door. We're going to be working on it. Like it has to go at 6 a.m. 5:55 a.m. We're going to be compiling.
Yep.
I don't know why it is, but that's the way it is. But it is.
I'm happy that I finished this before we actually sent them out. I was worried it was going to be literally like as you're shipping the first batch out, I'm going to make in that last commit. Like, oh, now it's done. So I'm happy I've got a couple days of breathing room now just to make sure I can go through and start looking at other things. But we're
going to have this is not the only thing. We got other things working, cool things as well. We got this vector freaking graphics OSD. That's
Oh,
that's
that's what I
pretty
was gonna.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
the
We're
fun,
we're
cool
gonna
little
yeah,
menus
we're
and
gonna
stuff like
cover
that.
that in another video. But yeah, that's pretty cool, and some of the features that allows is pretty cool. And and it's just gonna fly better in general. Like you're gonna get this thing and be like, man,
It does. It does. It's weird.
it's weird because when I got in the quads, and I've said this before, and if you could just thumbs down if I piss you off every time I say this, but I got my quad. I'm like, this thing flies freaking amazing, and then I get better software or better tune or better hardware, and then I'm like, oh my god, it flies even better. And then when we started writing the stuff, we would come up with new stuff, and like I thought it flew amazing, and then I flew like dog shit. Like I can't believe I thought that flew good. And that I think is the same exact feeling we're gonna have with this, where we didn't know it could fly better. You never know what you're missing until you get it.
Yeah,
Um,
it was very evident, albeit like kind of weird the first time when I finally got the H7 flying, because I mean it took forever to get a really good development to build that was stable enough for me to go out, take it out to the field and fly it. I brought my normal F4 quad and then an identical H7 rig, and it was crazy the difference going back and forth between them. I mean, even just like default tune H7 flew good, done. Defaults, that's it. I'm not gonna touch anything. But the other, I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours and hours tuning the F4 setup on Falco to get something that I thought felt really good, and it was just like I felt like I wasted all that time. Like the H7 in, I flew it identical build, and it flew fantastic on defaults. And I was like, all
and
that time on the F4 stuff now is just kind of like the base starting point now. So it's super exciting to have stuff like that happen, as annoying as it can be sometimes.
Yeah, and like I said, this is all special. So the developers, we've all had H7s, but the normal pilots, they haven't had them because these features, they're tough to flash, they're tough to work on. Everything's changed, so everyone is going to get these things around the same time. Even all our pilots, we didn't have enough prototypes to give to everyone, and not to mention, normal pilots aren't as fun for testing as you'd think because they
Yeah. Well,
expect
we're
everything to be
also
perfect.
still super developmental. I mean, as of like this week, we finally have builds that would even be flashable by normal people without having to use the command line essentially to flash everything. And
Yeah.
again, I literally have flashed my quad about 15 times a day, every single day for about 3 weeks. So it's not really something you want your average tester to go through in the first place, because it can be very annoying. It is incredibly time consuming and it's a ton of work.
So to summarize, we got this amazing filter coming. It's coming with the H7. We're gonna go over a lot of other cool shit in future videos. We're gonna try and like maybe I don't know. I don't want to say a video a day, but multiple videos a week for a while as we try and educate you on what's going on with this stuff. I'm gonna have please like and thumbs up and hit the bell and all that stuff. But I'm also gonna link my personal channel, and I'll link Nick's personal channel too. But I'm gonna start doing less formal videos on my personal channel, just to maybe update you on what's going on in the house or when we're working on stuff. Or I'm gonna do some other cool videos too, not just necessarily drone related. But we're going to try and keep product centric stuff on the FlightOne channel. And then, if Nick, I'm sure we'll do some videos like showing him working on the filters or whatever else. So, you can get some behind the scenes footage too on our personal channels. And I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to summarize before
All I
we're?
have to say is you have to make a video showing me how you make those pizzas, because you make the most incredible looking pizzas I've ever seen.
I haven't told you this yet, Nick, but you've seen the amazing deep dish and you've seen the amazing Napoleon where I had to hack the oven.
Yes, I,
Okay?
I have seen that.
I had to get to 1,000 degrees. But we have now, as of yesterday, mastered the New York pizza better than any restaurant I've ever had.
I want pizza so bad. I'm gonna
So
do pizza.
now I'm like the triple threat. Like, you want Chicago, you want Italian, you want New York, you come to my house. No, don't come to my house because I don't want COVID. But
Exactly.
when there's no more COVID, you come to my house. I'm going to make you the most amazing. I'll ship it. We need to pick one person. I need to ship them a pizza and dry ice or something, and tell me.
I would pay DHL to Australia for that. It is incredible.
But yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So we're gonna try and do some other cool stuff on the other channels too. But I want to we want to be more in communication with you. I think we want to do some of these videos with normal people too, so they can ask questions. We're gonna try and do some more interesting stuff.
Yeah. Now
And
that Cerebro 1.0 is done, I'll start making videos again. I feel like I've been locked in. I've like locked myself in the dungeon for like 3 weeks now, just trying to like get all the brain juices flowing, get this pumped out and ready to go. But now,
yeah, I think we've all been slammed and busy. And I've been having
yeah,
like kidney stone issues. I had freaking multiple surgeries and crap for that. That's all done with.
no thank you.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you have moved across the country now.
Yeah, I'm on the East Coast now because Arizona is the official hottest COVID place in the freaking universe. So I figured now would be a good time to be an East Coast person. What's cool is my kids are going to school online, so now I don't have to be stuck in Arizona if I don't want to be.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but it's kind of cool. So we had we usually come here in the summer, but with my surgeries and the kidney stones and crap, I was stuck back in Arizona, so I came in here later. But yeah, so everything is cool. We're on course. I'm sorry if we've been less responsive. We've been super busy, obviously working on this stuff and other things, but we should get more time freed up as the boards are coming in because we're coming to the point where we're ready for the first release. And we got some cool stuff coming. We're going to go over. It's pretty exciting. So I guess that's about it. Subscribe to both me and Nick's channel. If you're not subscribed to this one, please subscribe to this one. We're gonna start giving away these things like the
Oh
freaking
yeah,
candy too. I'm gonna let Nick give away some. I'm gonna give away some.
everyone's
Give away
getting
some of the
them.
flight. Like you get a flight controller. You get a flight controller. Y'all get flight controllers. Is what we're going for.
We get a flight
Um,
controller T-shirt gun to start blasting kids with them.
imagine like pelt them in the head. They're bleeding, but they got a flight controller, so they don't care. That's all that matters. They got that flight controller. So if you have anything you want us to cover, put them in the comments. If you liked anything about this video, put it in the comments. You have any questions, put them in the comments. If you hated Nick's voice, put it in the comments.
Exactly. And PayPal me money so I can buy a better headset. That too.
Hopefully this video works out like we hope. This is the first time we've recorded on both sides of the universe. We're going to splice them together. We're going to see how that works. We're using a nice little Discord box to tie us together. But we'll see how all that works as well. I don't know. I think that's it. Does that summarize it?
Yeah, that's everything and anything.